Alright, YouTube, it's time to discuss honorary titles or ascribed titles within the occult. I guess, my hesitance regarding their use. I've had people ask me, well, are you like a wizard or something? I don't really use any of these specific titles to describe myself. I say I'm involved with the occult. I take it as all forms of mysticism, all forms of ritualism, spirituality, every path of literature within the occult, all of it interests me. I never saw the point of sticking to one path or one organization or group or coven or whatever, and sort of role playing within. For instance, you'd think of the Church of Satan. The Church of Satan is not an occult organization. They don't practice magic after the more literal sense. They use psychological ritualism, which they believe affects reality, at least insofar as it's witnessed by those partaking in the ritual. The individual, for instance, you'd call down a death curse upon your enemy. It affects your behavior, it affects your outlook. It externalizes the psychology, and it can be positive. It can take care of stress and things like that. But they don't pretend that there's some demon or a literal Satan guiding their path. Their belief, of course, is essentially atheism, or agnosticism as it may be. If you talk to their public relations team, which is one person, and ask about magic, they'll call you an occult and they can tell you to go fuck yourself. So, just because they use titles like High Priest or Mage or something like that doesn't necessarily mean that they're actually practicing what we would think of as ceremonial occultism or a spiritual path indeed, because there's really no spirituality there. It's all a floor show. It's atheism with a floor show. The same is true of many of these other organizations. When a coven has a High Priestess, what's the point of having such a title? Why not simply say this is the most trained or learned occultist within our coven, and this is the person who sort of guides things because they have more experience? Using some term to denote the same thing, it becomes an honorary title, like mage, sorcerer, sorceress, operator, or something. Many grimoires use titles such as this. Mostly, though, if you're looking at some of the more diabolical works, they literally just refer to the operator or the conjurer. That is the person doing the conjuring. It doesn't say, oh, the high mage must do this, and the prelates gathered around must do this, and the praetors gathered around must do this, and the sorcerer is off to the side, or whatever. It's just not present in any real form. These titles are most often used by standardized, very westernized style orders. I know in the Eastern tradition, you would have sort of the yogi or something like that. You would have various honorary titles as well to describe people who have attained such a state of enlightenment, real or imagined, that they are deserving of some sort of honor for the position that they've attained. It's not really so much of a position as it is just a statement about their wisdom. You would think of the shaman, or shaman, whichever you pronounce it as. I hear both all the time. Within like Mesoamerican tradition, or among psychonauts, or so, even the title psychonaut itself, someone who's using these psychedelic substances to explore the spiritual, or the nature of reality, or reason and philosophy, or anything like that. It's just a term that they happen to use to describe their actions. That being said, the most appropriate term is simply user of the occult. It has no real honorary title or association to it. It's simply taken in pure form, someone practicing the occult, or something like conjurer or psychonaut, as opposed to some order breaking things down into a hierarchy. For instance, you have the novices, and they're just starting out. They've been accepted into our order, but they haven't learned anything yet. And then they become an adept, and they're a full member, and they've trained the basics, and they know this and that sort of philosophical tenet and this understanding of our main book. And then you have the priests and priestesses, and they're higher than the adepts, and they've studied even more. And then the high priests and priestesses, and then at the top we have the pylon, or the mage, or the grand wizard, or something like that. And it all becomes a little bit strange. It's basically just an attempt by an order to break themselves down into different groups, to enter people into different stages of knowledge, the way we might in a public school. You know, you go to kindergarten and first grade and so on and so on forth, and you go to middle school, and you go to high school. What I always thought about many of these orders is they're literally just initiatory orders. Not initiatory as in you have to be initiated into the sect and swear on the devil's Bible or cut yourself and bleed on a parchment and write your name or something. Initiatory as in they are the most basic rudimentary stage of understanding within the occult. That's why I left Satanism. I had purged myself of guilt and fear through Satanism, a very positive practice, I believe, and I've professed that people should look into Satanism to do just that. They should consider joining a satanic movement or becoming an independent Satanist. They probably should read the Satanic Bible, or at the very least, they should read Might is Right by Ragnar Redbeard, which is basically the same, and you can get it for free instead of paying like $30 to the Church of Satan or something. I have suggested this, but my suggestion does not extend to you should stay there your entire life, never look into any other aspect of spirituality. Whether it's a mocking of spirituality or not, it would be like suggesting to somebody, read this introductory work on philosophy that gives you a broad overview of philosophy, and never read any other philosophical works after you've done so, because that's all you need. No, I don't think that that's appropriate. I think that that holds people back. Now, some of these orders want to hold people back in hopes either that their more arcane knowledge remains more selective, that is, they have a hold over the real stuff. The Masons do this too. They're higher levels. They have philosophical tenets that lower-leveled Masons don't access. There's sort of 5 early stages of the Masons before they've become a Master Mason. And not everybody gets to that level. You can get these booklets off of eBay. It's like From the East to the West, The Entered Apprentice, Master Mason, and so forth. That's essentially what it's like. But other groups want to test the individuals to see if they'll just ignore that and they'll study more anyway, and then they become more worthy. I would think in a proper Luciferian tradition, the idea should be you should suppress your members to see if they break free of that suppression through subversion or something. And if they do so, then they're more appropriate for a satanic order than somebody who simply buys the little red card for $200, has the Satanic Bible, talks about how great LaVey was or something. And that's really all they do. They become sort of a real-life mockery of Catholicism, and that's basically what it extends to. It's very amusing, but it's not an occultist, and it's not an individual who's really satanic when you think about it. They're not rebelling against anything. Satanism has largely become accepted by everybody except for like the evangelical movement and maybe hardcore Sunnis anyway, so who gives a fuck? These honorary titles are usually taken up by people who themselves don't necessarily have a significantly larger skill set than the people that they're supposedly lording over. That is, anybody with any sense at all can study all of these things. It's like the average high priestess of a Wiccan coven has studied Wiccan material. Have they studied satanic material? Have they studied old grimoires? Have they read Agrippa? Have they read Nostradamus or John Dee or Roger Bacon or Trithemius or any of these other things? Have they studied the actual history of the occult, anything beyond their coven? No, they've walled themselves in with maybe a few dozen members. They sort of role play. It's like LARPing or something like that. Pagan groups have done this as well, satanic groups. The best example, Christians do it all the time. The common criticism of Christianity would be that the average religious Christian, they read the Bible, they never read anything else, unless it's from an approved Christian author, beloved by the pastor or priest or something like that. You know, some side material, something not canonical, and it's stated that it's not canonical. And the priest lords over them, or the pastor lords over them, and sort of tells them what's acceptable or not. Remembering back when I was within Christianity, of course, people back then were saying, oh, you shouldn't read Harry Potter, it'll lead you off into witchcraft or something like that. Well, I was interested in that before I read Harry Potter, so maybe I'm just the exception to the rule. Maybe it did create a massive occult renaissance. I think the internet did that more than Harry Potter did, although there are some real occult mentions in Harry Potter. I've already covered this, the Hand of Glory, that comes from authentic occultism. Some of these other things, they are more or less authentic. Even like the idea of Nicholas Flamel, he was a real alchemist, although maybe not concerned with transmutation as much as the philosophical side, let's face it. But yes, these honorary titles, most often they're heaped upon, somebody establishes an order, gives themselves an honorary title, writes a manuscript about what is essentially their cult, gets a few dozen or a few hundred people to join up, puts a site on the internet, gets a few thousand more people on their mailing list, and they sit there and they just sort of absorb the adulation of their members and the criticism of people who aren't members of their movement. It's like Joel of Arcadia or something, who's, I believe, has proclaimed himself to be Jesus and is still out in California somewhere. Got one of his manuscripts, it's like the weirdest thing you'll ever read. These groups exist in the tens of thousands all over the world. And the only thing really differentiating them from a mainstream religion is size. The priest or the pastor or whatever, they've taken an honorary title that doesn't necessarily mean they know anything specifically about any objective philosophical truth or any objective spiritual truth. It doesn't necessarily mean that they've studied a great deal of literature, that they've reviewed a great deal of material in various spiritual and philosophical paths, or in secular paths. In order to synthesize an herbal, you need a secular working understanding of botany. You can't simply say, well, this is just ancient traditions, I understand that, and so I created an herbal. No, you're just echoing what other people have said. You haven't synthesized the material further than that. You have to have a much wider understanding, and I think most of these people who proclaim themselves to be a wizard, or a witch, or a warlock, or a mage, sorcerer, sorceress, priest, priestess, high priest, high priestess, adept, whatever it happens to be, they don't understand shit about shit. And so that's why I don't use those titles. I think wizard would be most appropriate if we're looking at the authentic usage, sort of someone more into the rural lifestyle. I like the herbs and the plants and venerate nature. I have the pagan tradition. And I study literature for itself, not just for occultism. But I don't really use the title, oh, I'm a wizard, I'm fucking Gandalf or something. It just wouldn't make sense within my practice, because it goes a lot further than that. I'm interested in literally anything even loosely associated with the spiritual. I've gone well beyond just the core of the occult with grimoires. I've started reading like quack medicine manuscripts. I just bought one off eBay. It's like dream interpretation, mid-1800s, mixed with sort of herbal remedies and the quack doctor stuff from the era. I'm going to be editing and releasing that as soon as I get it in the mail. That stuff fascinates me. It goes well beyond just, well, here's how to communicate with demons or angels. This sort of the high magic systems. Well beyond that, and well beyond any sect or any single spiritual movement. That's about all. Peace out.